Danger Zone.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Kev Baker, and this is the Kev Baker Show right here on TFRlive.com. Hope you're all having a good day, you're all settled down, and you are ready for another amazing 2 hours of radio with me, myself, and my good friend, co-host for a Wednesday and a Monday, and I'm his co-host on a Friday, author, researcher, speaker. He wears many hats, this man, Anthony Patch. He is here live with me tonight. And of course, for all you Whistler fans out there, and I know you come in your droves to hear the man, the myth, the legend that is Johnny Whistles. You know, it's not many shows in alternative media or even the mainstream can claim that they've got a direct descendant from the Knights Templars as a co-host. How unique is that? And I know all of you out there love the Whistler. He'll be along for the second hour of the show. And possibly, get this, we may have a surprise guest in the second hour to add to the mix as well. All of that to look forward to right here on KBS. And before we get going tonight, warm up slowly here, a bit of a housekeeping out the way. Tomorrow, it's just going to be myself and Johnny. I've been getting sent lots of links by one of my chief researchers out there, Alistair. I don't pay him a penny, by the way. The guy he loves the woo. He's been sending me some terrific information today. I've got it all saved in a folder, and I'm going to blow your minds with that tomorrow night, myself and the Whistler. And of course, on Friday, you can catch me as co-host for Anthony Patch from 10 p.m. in the UK, and then I'll jump on to Freaky Friday right after that. 5 hours of radio for me on a Friday, and it's absolutely brilliant. Big shout out to Chris and Cherie Gio for putting this all together, and to my co-host, my friend, my, what do you call this, sparring partner in these crazy times, Mr. Anthony Patch. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, always good to be with you, my friend, and we've got a lot to cover today. We kind of pulled the trigger on a shotgun, and we've got a whole lot of things that stuck to the wall in terms of topics today, but we're gonna talk a little bit about Johannes Kepler today to lead off the show.
That's going to be fantastic, and just wait till the listeners hear this. But before we even get there, Tony, right, you know, over here in Europe, we're a strange bunch, okay? And it's summertime right now, and there is an absolutely blistering heat wave hitting southern Europe. And of course, typically, Scotland, we're not getting any of this at all, Tony. Nice day today, but we certainly aren't experiencing anything like the heat wave that they've dubbed Lucifer. I'm not kidding you, folks. There is a heat wave in Europe right now, and they have named it Lucifer. Now, they say that this was the people of Europe who came up with this name themselves. Although the only place I see this name being pushed, Tony, is in the mainstream media. Now, you're talking about some places reaching higher than 40 degrees Celsius. And it says here that heat waves, unlike storms, aren't named by meteorologists. So it's not some new trend that we're seeing, like where they name all the storms and stuff like that. But what do you think, Tony, using the word Lucifer to describe a heat wave? There's always more than one meaning to everything. And, you know, I think they use these words for a reason.
I think they do, just to create fear, and it also is a tip of the hat to who they actually are worshiping and where science has its roots. I think, you know, to say that it's the people, that it's, you know, the average person on the street, Joe Bag of Donuts, as I like to call it, giving names to storms and heat waves and all of that is pure nonsense. It comes out of the compromised weather services.
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, I obviously do feel for anyone that's living in that kind of heat right now. But over here in the UK, and especially Scotland, Tony, I mean, we pay hundreds and hundreds of pounds to go and spend 10 days, 14 days in blistering hot weather like this. It's not going to put any Scottish people off. And I can only imagine the varying degrees of sunburn they're going to come back with, because we're not used to heat like that, dude.
No, and, you know, really, we've talked about this many times, that just stepping out into the sun, even with the chemtrail spraying that's, you know, sort of covering over the sunlight, but we feel the ultraviolet rays as pinpricks on the skin. And so to go out and lay in the sun at the beach or wherever, you're just setting yourself up for trouble nowadays. It's unfortunate, but you don't even have to have high temperatures. Just going out and being exposed is enough to create some problems in terms of leading to skin cancer.
And Tony, before we get into tonight's first story, sticking on this just briefly, I mean, dare I say climate change? I know people automatically think you're pushing some Al Gore agenda there, but climate change, it always changes. It's a natural, cyclical kind of phenomena. And do you think these kind of temperatures in Europe, and we've seen up in the northwest as well, I believe it's experiencing hot temperatures right now, kind of out of character. Do you think this kind of trend is set to continue? And that's not to spread fear or anything. It's just the times we're living in.
It is. I mean, a lot of times we have to look at the solar minimum that we're in now, and we're seeing more sunspot activity and, of course, a lot more in the way of charged particles in the form of flares being thrown off from the surface of the sun. And just as a real quick point, when we talk about flaring of the sun, those are charged particles. Let's just say protons for the sake of discussion today. Those particles, as they move away from the surface of the sun, as they move away from the flaring activity, certainly a lot of it is magnetically attracted back to the magnetic surface of the sun. But the particles that are thrown off, they actually increase in speed the further they move away from the sun in terms of Earth-directed particles. I'm not talking about the remainder of the particles throwing off into the cosmos, so to speak, but certainly with Earth-directed, they accelerate in speed, increase in speed because of the magnetic attraction of the Earth itself to these oppositely charged particles. And therefore, the particles reach maximum acceleration, if you will, when they hit our magnetosphere, the shields around the planet. And with the changes, what they call the changes of shape or morphology of those shields due to things that are happening with HARP, NEXRAD, even with CERN when they're operating at high power with their magnets, anytime that you change the shape, that you lessen the integrity of the shields, tear it, or even puncture holes in it as HARP does, then you're allowing charged particles to move through the shields and to strike the surface of the Earth and to strike people. And it's not just ultraviolet rays, but it is actually charged particles. So think of the sun as a particle accelerator, and then the Earth acting as a magnet to increase the speed. The more of those particles that strike the Earth means that we also have more other bands in the electromagnetic spectrum, such as gamma rays and X-rays and ultraviolet rays that are penetrating as well. So the particle count is a good indicator as to what types of energies, along with the particles, that we are now encountering. And that leads to heating of the atmosphere, changes in weather patterns, certainly changes in the Gulf Stream itself and the jet stream, because you have alternating areas that are being heated or cooled, but predominantly heated beneath the point in the shields that are either being opened or holes that are being manifest in it. So think about the shields, and that leads to a lot of what we're seeing in the way of abnormal temperatures. Go ahead.
Living in Scotland, that Gulf Stream, that is absolutely critical to us maintaining the climate, or so-called climate, that we've got here, Tony, because if you look on the atlas, on the map, we are basically on the same kind of latitude, longitude as Moscow. And we see the weather over there, right? But it's only thanks to the Gulf Stream that we don't end up having a similar climate to that. But when I was looking into the BP oil spill way back in 2010, they were talking about the Gulf Stream stalling, stuff like that. Thankfully, it hasn't done that yet, Tony. But can you imagine the knock-on effect that would have all around the planet? Because that's tied hand in hand to something called the thermohaline system, or the haline thermio system. And it's basically like the lungs of the planet, because that river of water that's in the jet stream, and the Gulf Stream is just one kind of connecting part to as above, so below, mean, this goes right round the planet, and everything would change if you just take one of those links out.
Yeah, a lot of times people, they focus on the heat that is contained within the Gulf Stream itself, and that moves, of course, from the Gulf off the shores of Texas and Louisiana and places like that, move past Florida. But what it does is it actually travels northward along the eastern seaboard of the United States and eventually strikes Greenland, Iceland, but also the Arctic itself, and it draws those cold deep sea beds, that cold water draws it from the north and brings it further down. And of course, it hits you guys in, Europe as cold water, cold temperatures. But what it does is it creates a balancing effect. If you do not have the northern movement of the Gulf Stream to those cooler waters, the result is excessive heating of the planet, because the Gulf Stream does not have an opportunity to mix with colder water. There you go.
See, this is why I love hanging with you, Tony. It really is. I start off with just a kind of throwaway story about a heat wave in Europe and look at the information that we get departed on us there. Absolutely brilliant. I love it, man. I love it. Now, something else you've come up with, and we've spoke about often in the past, is your theory about the 600-cell model of the universe. And that's where we're going to start tonight, Tony, because we often say that confirmations come along later on after you've put things out there. And the confirmation that you're about to get into tonight, well, this comes from way, way when.
Are you going to me? I'm sorry, did you toss it?
Yeah, I tossed it to you about the 600-cell theory, how we've had some confirmation come through.
Yeah, the signal kind of dropped out there. Yeah, this is Johannes Kepler, and I'm just going to read from back in 1595 when he published The Cosmic Mystery. And if you would, go ahead and put the link up in the chat room for folks. And when you publish this this conversation on YouTube, go ahead and put the link up as well that I gave you that shows the solar system. It is a model, an animated GIF that shows the configuration, according to Kepler in 1595, of the solar system. And it is comprised of the Platonic solids. Platonic solids are the sphere, the tetrahedron, the cube, and your basic triangle. So if you look at Johannes Kepler's model of the universe, what you are going to see is that, or model of the solar system, is the actual Platonic solids contained within the planetary orbits. Now, Kepler was putting forth the idea, and actually, I think I'm going to correct this. Okay, yeah, he's got this here. In 1619, Johannes Kepler published The Harmony of the World, but he started in 1595 with the Cosmographic Mystery. What we're talking about here is that he was plotting the orbits of the planets as he observed them back in the late 1500s. And he was assigning the Platonic solids as the orbital pathways of the planets Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Earth, Venus, and Mercury. Now, when you look at this, the idea is the very center of this spherical model, again, a globe model of our solar system, and also the constellations. So the constellations are the outer surface of the globe, and then moving inward, he's showing the orbital pathways of the planets, the known planets at that time, as prescribing the tetrahedronally derived Platonic solids. As you move into the center of this illustration by Kepler, you will see at the center point the tetrahedron that I continue to go on and on and on about. Now, later on, we're going to talk about the significance, again, in math and in computer software coding and in cryptology, the significance of three numbers that relate to the tetrahedron. And we touched on this when we talked about balanced ternary numbers, -1, 0, and +1. and related that to quantum computing. So we'll get into that a little later on. We've got a 2-hour show, but we're going to touch back a little bit on that. What I'm getting at here in terms of geometry is that the tetrahedron is significant, according to Kepler, in prescribing the shape of the known solar system and therefore the known universe, extending out as far as the observable constellations forming the shell of this global model of what he was observing and others before him. So the tetrahedron factors into so many areas in science, whether you want to talk about biology, chemistry, particle physics, astronomy, astrology. All of these things tie in, and they have a spiritual component, which we'll get into a little bit later as well, in the Kabbalistic belief. Now, I'm not a Kabbalist, and I'm not a sacred geometry person, but all of these things have been, in my estimation, stolen and counterfeited from God the Creator, who set up all of these mathematical geometric arrangements and mathematical progressions of what we see with the planets. So, Kev, if you got a comment, go ahead, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to actually read the description from Kepler. Go ahead.
I'll let you catch your breath there, Tony. And anytime I hear about the Platonic solids been mentioned, our mutual friend, James Swagger, he informed me one time about something that blew my mind, because this actually came from Scotland, and there's something dated roughly to around 2000 BC. I've dropped the picture in the chat for you here, Tony, on Skype to look at. I'll drop it in the chat room at tfrlive.com/chat for listeners there to look at as well. But here we are, going back over 4,000 years, and yet whoever was kicking about, shaping these stones, they had knowledge of these Platonic solids. That just blows my mind, Anthony. It really, really does. And back to the Kepler story and the yet more confirmation, it seems to me now that it's getting faster and faster. We're getting more and more information coming in that almost is lockstep with the kind of stuff that you've been putting out now for a while. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it isn't so much to puff up my ego or any of those things. What I'm really trying to do is just illustrate for the listeners that you and I really try to look for the truth. We try to drill down deeply. We try to look at the origins of the things that we hear in the mainstream media, mainstream science, that they put out, as just blanket statements in many cases. So what we're trying to do is show you the history. And we have said for almost a week now, Kev, that what they're trying to do with the book burnings and things like that are going on, and these are stories in the mainstream media of book burnings. So they're trying to eliminate the historical record, and we put it in the context of talking about the Mandela effect. But there's a bigger issue here, and that is that if you eliminate the historical record, then you can pretty much make up whatever story and whatever theories and whatever reality you want in the present and in the future. And we're trying to give you the historical origins, again, looking at things like Kepler back in 1500 and 1600, at the historical record for where the basis for scientific research and theories originate from. So go ahead, and then I'm going to read this. Kev, go ahead.
You get some people that analyze the geopolitical conspiracies. Some people like myself, we go into the aliens, the disclosure, stuff like that. But when myself, Mr. Patch, and Whistles team up, we're like almost science truthers. We're trying to expose what the real science is, from the very top to the very bottom, from the universal scale right down to where I love it, at the quantum level. But Tony, I will give it back to you. I'll let you read out this explanation.
All righty. Let's see, we've got about 6 minutes. Okay, so I've got enough time. The URL for this is demonstrations.wolfram. That's WOLFRAM.com, wolfram.com / Kepler's Harmonics Mundi / Anyway, we'll post that in the YouTube video of this as well in the notes for this animation. You could look up The Harmony of the World, published by Johannes Kepler, Kepler, 1619, and you'll find it. All right, so here's the description of what he published. In 1595, Kepler speculated that the orbits of the 6 planets at the known time, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, could be arranged in spheres nested around the 5 platonic solids, the octahedron, the icosahedron, the dodecahedron, the tetrahedron, and the cube. For the platonic polyhedra, arranged in this order, coinciding circumspheres for a given polyhedron and or in spheres, those are inner spheres, for the next polyhedron gave a fair approximation for the relative sizes of the planetary orbits around the sun. Kepler later rejected this model as insufficiently accurate, but remains as an amusing exercise in solid geometry. The predicted orbits are expressed in astronomical units, AUs, equal to the average radius of the Earth's orbit. What we're getting at here is that given the technology, which are just optical telescopes at the time, they weren't absolutely accurate in their ability to prescribe mathematically the orbits of the planets. But the central theme here that I want to emphasize is the fact that they were using the platonic solids as the models of the orbits. Now, most of us, when we think of the orbits of planets, we think of a circle or an ellipse or an oval, because there are perturbations, there are changes to the orbits. And Kepler writes about this, the perturbations of the orbits of the planets. And in his discussion in those times, he assigned those deviations, those changes in a pure circular orbit, to be attributed to the effects of gravity. And that notion has carried forward all the way until the present time. However, what we've put forth here for a long time now, thanks to the Thunderbolts project, is the notion that electromagnetism, magnetism being 10 to the 39th power stronger than gravity, is the more realistic force of the 4 primary forces in the universe. The primary force of determining the orbits of the planets has to do with electromagnetism. To give it in a particle physics framework, we're looking at charged particles. If you think of the sun and the planets as being charged particles, and they have opposite charges, their predominant charges being either positive or negative, then you see this attraction and repelling. Now, I'm not going to get too confusing here, but I just want to, as a side note, say that when you get into talking about superconductivity at ultra cold temperatures, you have an interesting phenomenon occur with electrons. Electrons are both negatively charged, but when you bring them down to a superconducting state, as you do with a quantum computer, oppositely charged particles such as electrons then become Cooper pairs, and they begin to bond into pairs. And this is what happens in the super cold environment of D-Wave's quantum computers, where we get into talking about superconducting materials. Now, that will be relevant when we get on to a little bit further discussion again about quantum computers. But think about how cold it is in space. So just because a planet and the sun may have oppositely charged predominant charges that are opposite, they can, in certain circumstances, actually bond together or pull together or repel each other. It depends on their position, their relative positions, and how cold the temperatures are relative to the sun. So bring it all the way back to full circle. According to Kepler, the universe, the solar system, but the known universe at the time, was built upon tetrahedrons that then produced the platonic solids. Go ahead, Kev.
Go figure, eh? There's that tetrahedron yet again. And of course, we were talking on Monday night about the scientist who was blatantly staring at a 128-point hypercube that was made up entirely of tetrahedrons, and he was still talking about cubes. This is absolutely brilliant, and we're only in one segment so far, folks. We'll be back after the break. We'll be touching on more of this. We'll be touching more on that ternary code as well, and how this all ties in together. with Mr. Anthony Patch, and you can find his work over at anthonypatch.com. Remember to check out Entangled magazine. I feature promptly this. Stay tuned.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
We are back. We are live. I'm Kev Baker, and you're tuned into tonight's Kev Baker Show right here on TFRlive.com. And if you haven't figured it out yet, yes, we are at an earlier time, but no, it's not just 1 hour anymore. We are on for 2 hours, and I am absolutely over the moon because that means I get to geek out with my good friend and fellow host on the network, Anthony Patch. And during the break, we found a quantum wanderer on Skype. Yes, that's right. Mr. Joe Joseph is here with us as well. Joe, what a treat for the audience and for me and Tony as well. How you doing, man?
I'm already drooling. I don't know what to tell you, man. You guys have already melted my brain.
Well, it's only going to get better from here on in because
or butter.
We're going to start talking again about ternary code, and what Anthony is going to present here really is going to blow your minds because we like to tie everything together. We like to kind of connect the dots. And we're going to connect this trinary code that we were talking about and introduced the other night, Tony, to the Kabbalah. How does this all work?
Well, I'll give you the punchline and then we'll work backwards because that's my normal pattern of doing things. In case somebody wants to tune out, they've already got the punchline. In ternary mathematics, ternary is -1, 0, and +1, rather than a binary of 0 and 1. We're talking about -1, 0, and +1. That is called a balanced ternary system, and this is utilized in quantum computers. It is utilized in standard classical transistor-based computing, in computing language. But what I think is significant is the origin of computer programming, whether you're talking about binary or ternary. Balanced ternary, having 0 in the middle, means that it is essentially focusing everything in an endless loop back to a starting point of 0. This gets into the discussions of fractals and spirals, and it even applies cosmologically as well as down at the quantum scale of quantum mechanics. But the punchline is, this is derived from the Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic system of worlds. Now, in the Kabbalah tree that people are familiar with, there are the circles, the actual globes, the spheres, that are called sephirots, and there are 10 of those. To make this very short and succinct, and we'll work backwards, the Ein Sof, which is the 0 in the Kabbalistic system of the Kabbalah tree, the Ein Sof, is the limitless and boundless region. What I'm saying here, in short, is that their goal, based upon the worship of Lucifer, their goal is to return everything to that center point of 0. It is neither hot nor cold, Joe.
But lukewarm.
This ought to wake you up. But lukewarm. And what does Jesus Christ say about being hot or cold? Let's say that hot is +1.
Well, he respects hot or cold.
Let's say that cold is -1.
Yeah.
But in the middle, as you just said, is what?
Well, that's he basically
lukewarm.
says he'll spew you out of his mouth because he doesn't respect fence sitters. He doesn't respect people that are either or that are neither hot or cold. He respects people that are hot or cold. He's like, hey, make a decision. Exactly. You're either a 1 or a -1, but don't be a 0.
And yet, this system is what is being utilized by D-Wave. And that's what we went into quite a bit of discussion about on Monday. I'm not going to get into the whole thing again today. People can go to the archives at TFR. They can go to both Kev and my channel on YouTube, and you can listen to that breakdown. But I'll give you just real quickly so that we can move along. This is the definition of balanced ternary, and ternary is spelled T-E-R, not T-F-R, okay? T-E-R-N-A-R-Y. and it is a non-standard positional numerical system, a balanced form, useful for comparison logic. The short story on this is binary takes too long. Binary is fraught with decoherence, with errors. And binary is based upon in a geometrical representation of programming on the cube. If you look at ternary, -1, 0, and +1, that is based upon a system of base 3. Base 3, if you look at it geometrically compared to the cube of binary, ternary is what, Kev? What shape in geometry is ternary related to?
Oh, the tetrahedron, Tony.
There it is again, that pesky tetrahedron again.
And we can thank Kepler for applying that to his model of the solar system and, at that time, the known universe. So again, folks, these things are all tied together. There are no loose ends here. We're tying it all up for you. Go ahead, guys.
No, absolutely, Tony. And this is all new stuff to Joe, but we were also talking about how this ternary kind of code, this -1, the 0, and the 1 as well, Joe, it ties into these recurrent neural networks. And these are the things like we were talking about during the break. We were kind of having a laugh and a joke about how there's probably AI right now listening to what we actually talk about when we post things.
Don't you know it? Don't you know it? I guess my thing is, Kev, is that you don't really realize who's listening when we talk about this kind of stuff. But interestingly enough, I feel sometimes that even the people that are designing this stuff don't realize that they're being used as tools or vessels to accomplish this plan, even if they may not know it, you know?
Absolutely. And, you know, this AI, this example I'm using with the kind of YouTube, Joe, I mean, it's only going to get better as time goes on, and it'll know exactly what to censor just by words that we use. And this ternary kind of function ties in with this because it's machine learning, it's deep learning all the time. And even when it gets it wrong and it misses something that it should have caught, that's going to be taught into the system and it's not going to get it wrong again. So as the months, and I think it's going to be speeding up really quickly, go forward, you know, just posting something, you can play about with the tags, you can play about with the title, but it's literally the machine will be listening to your wave patterns of your voice.
Absolutely. And so that's what really bothers me is I just did a news shot this week on YouTube censorship and just how it affects not just, you know, us over at the Sheeple, but the whole independent media. I mean, this is what they did is they introduced a very powerful social networking tool and a very powerful video-based site. And then they added the whole monetization factor to it, right? So that was great because everybody could become a content creator and actually fund their operation and expand their operation to include like websites and things like that. It comes at a cost, but a very good way to do it. That was inconvenient. It was not inconvenient, you know, didn't inconvenience anybody really. And now they just, they pull the rug out from underneath it as they introduce AI. And it hasn't taken long at all for this AI to learn, you know, what's said, what's not said, what got snuck through, what didn't. And it's harder and harder to fool it, dude. I'm telling you, it's getting crazy.
Exactly. And, you know, the best demonstration, Tony, for people to see this is when you see the AI being trained when it's using computer games, just simple blockbusting games. It starts out, it does not have a clue what it's doing, but within 5 generations, it's teaching the world's best players. And of course, this stuff that we cover, this all ties into that because this is what's bringing about these breakneck speed advancements, isn't it?
It is. And the reason is that it is an exponential increase in the capabilities of AI. Because it is a Boltzmann machine, recursive neural network process of self-teaching, it is self-error correcting. It is utilizing errors. As we said about D-Wave in their prototypical first model, first generation computer, their benchmark was to take decoherence and use it to their advantage, to incorporate it. This goes into the whole discussion of Monte Carlo, statistical analysis and classification.
Tony,
do
you think that's where D-Wave made the kind of move that has seen them go so far ahead of the rest? The fact they realized that they could use something that usually is such a problem, and they actually looked at it a different way and thought, we can utilize that. Is that where the other ones where we're seeing these theoretical 51 qubit machines doing Shor's algorithm been trumped up? Because we know that D-Wave's a different animal altogether. It's like comparing, a cat to a gorilla.
It really is, because it's the programming. It's the programming of the hardware that is really important. And when you talk about qubits, that's one step. But you have to, and again, I give credit to D-Wave that almost 2 years ago, they opened it up for developers, for third-party software developers. And they even said back in 2015, they said, we want to open it up to what we would consider the new Microsoft. Okay, focus on this for a moment. Think about software as it was developed for the PCs and what that did in the world of Microsoft taking over the world. Now we're talking about software specific to quantum computing that has its beginnings in 2015 in terms of startup companies, software companies. And now we're in almost the end of 2017. And they have the advantage of using AI to develop the software, not just guys sitting down and writing code, but now AI that is taking the errors and saying, oh, we can learn from our mistakes. Now, you know the old truism, and that is you learn more from your mistakes than you do from getting the correct answers. That is exactly what the software programming in a endless loop recursive neural network programming process does for D-Wave. The third-party developers recognized, hey, don't throw out all these errors. Take it in, classify it, use the Boltzmann machine, and now we have the ability to exponentially learn, exponentially grow the AI in terms of its ability to understand and learn and manifest in different ways like its own language. But the other part of that is you can exponentially take in more data from the Internet of Everything and increase the density of the data, which is called the granularity, which is where I propose that they are going, which is the spontaneous conversion of information into matter, binary or ternary processed information, taking that and converting it to matter. When you have the density of the matter, the granularity reaches a tipping point and you spontaneously convert to matter, because there is no difference between information loosely arranged in a light form of density and the information comprising solid matter. When you talk about and this is going way out, you hear the guys talking about black holes, and they say that information is lost, information is destroyed in a black hole scenario. Now, forget about whether black holes are theoretical or not, but just in that context of discussion, when they say a loss of information, you have to define information. Information is the mathematics of the universe that prescribes the geometry of the universe. And when you prescribe the geometry, you are arranging the information to then spontaneously coalesce, if you will, or have the covalence, the bonding of information, such that there is so much information that it spontaneously becomes matter. This is the conversion of energy into matter, E equals mc squared. So it's not far-fetched when I say the AI can increase the density of information to the point where it spontaneously converts from energy form of information to a matter, solid matter form of information arranged geometrically, starting with the tetrahedron. And that's why ternary, 0 and 1 and 1, -1, 0, and +1 is so important because that prescribes in computer programming the geometric shape of the tetrahedron, which then spawns all matter in the universe. Go ahead, guys.
Absolutely amazing. And, at the start of that, you mentioned the Boltzmann machine. And that's something we've brought up on the show time and time again. And during my research today for the show, looking through articles as you do, I came across one on Wired magazine. And, they hide things in plain sight. And I would never have known this unless I'd been covering this with Tony and Whistles and everyone else for the past little while. But the picture that I'm about to post in the chat room, I want you to check this out because this is literally a story about the Palantir AI software, the stuff that works in the police departments, the NSA, stuff like that. Remember Donald Trump at that freaky ball over in Saudi Arabia? That mob, Palantir. Well, they have just gone and overlaid a Boltzmann machine model over the top of a policeman. And most people looking at that, reading that article, they just won't realize what they're looking at, Tony. But to me, again, get more confirmation of being on the right track here.
Yeah, and Palantir is a Silicon Valley company. And as we sort of joked before the show, they were pushed into the world of surveillance. Well, their whole premise, their whole business model is built on surveillance. They were selling their business model and software to the intelligence agencies. And that's great. If you're trying to protect us from the bad guys, more power to you guys. Love it. Just don't come around targeting innocent people like yours truly and many of those people that are associated with me, like Kevin, Joe, and Johnny. Hey, we're the good guys. We got nothing against you. Go and surveil the bad guys. Use your Palantir and go after, in your surveillance, in your policing of the world, and just go after the bad guys that got the bombs, okay? Leave us alone.
Here's a practical example of that at work. I watched a program one time and it was about a series of murders that had taken place in New Jersey somewhere. Long story short, it took the FBI about a year to get involved and then about the same amount of time again to realize that there was a serial killer on the loose. Now, if you've got something like an AI looking at all of that, all of these different police reports from all over the country, looking for and finding patterns that human eyes cannot detect, then there's the good side of this thing. But there's always two sides of it. Always two sides. And that example there, Tony, I mean, that's the kind of example that could revolutionize policing.
Yeah, going back into the 70s, I was a military policeman in the Army, okay? But I understand enough about civilian police work as well. And they would use push pins on a map, and they would plot out, major crimes on the map. And they would use that as a way to predict where the trending is taking place in various neighborhoods. Well, most of that's because of, gangs and concentrations of gangs and bad guys. But think about the pin map today. That's what AI is doing. That's what Palantir is doing, is the pin map process, but in an ultra sophisticated fashion.
And with so many different data inputs as well, Tony, that's where it kind of takes off from what humans are able to do, because all the computing that it has to do in the background, looking at all the various kind of data sources that are coming in, the fact that it can search through that, it's like trying to find needles in piles of needles.
Yeah, it's funny you say needles, because there was somebody who referenced me as a needle in a haystack not long ago. And I won't tell you the context of that one, because that's a rather sharp and pointed topic.
But Joe, what do you make of all this talk of AI getting involved in policing? Or, in fact, I've just seen the chat. Joe's away. He's dealing with a drama right now, Tony. But yeah, this is Palantir. This is what they do. And the ironic thing about the story in question was it was one of the police officers was complaining because it was a sensitive case he was working on. But anyone who typed in a registration plate was able to look at these sensitive documents. And I was kind of laughing, Tony, because he was on about the privacy of his informants and stuff like that. And, well, privacy's a long dead thing, especially when you've got AI working in police departments now.
There is no privacy in this world anymore, and we know that. So we just work around it. We just live with it, we deal with it, and we understand it. But let me go back just a moment, if I could. We were talking about the Kabbalah tree and Kabbalistic principles and the balanced ternary. One of the other things I wanted to point out real quickly about the zero, and I'm going to read this. Are we still there? Did I lose you?
We're still here, Tony. We're still here.
All right, that signal keeps beeping at me. Okay, when the divine essence, and realize, folks, I'm a Christian. I'm not a practitioner of the Kabbalistic practices. I'm just illustrating for you. When the divine essence thus retires from the circular boundary to the center, it leaves behind the abyss, okay? Or as the Kabbalists term it, the great privation. Thus, in Ein Sof, which is the zero, is established a twofold condition where previously had existed but one. The first condition is the central point, the primitive objectified radiance of the eternal subjectified life. About this radiance is darkness caused by the deprivation of the life, which is drawn to the center to create the first point, or universal germ. The universal Ein Sof, therefore, no longer shines through space, but rather upon space from an established first point. Now, I won't go on any further than that. What I'm saying here is that in the Kabbalistic view of the Ein Sof, they view the center point, the beginning, the all-pervading zero, as they describe it. I'm reading it right off of here. It manifesting as the one, the primitive limitation of the all-pervading zero. So this concept of utilizing balanced ternary mathematics in computing, both classical computing and quantum computing, utilizing those three, which are a balanced set of numbers. Binary is not balanced. It's an either-or. It's a left-right paradigm. It is a divisional paradigm, just like sports. The balanced paradigm is -1, 0, and +1, ternary. In the Kabbalistic thinking, they describe the zero as the abyss. So what do you think about that, my friend?
Oh, well, I'm not surprised, Tony, because there's the abyss again, and it all ties together. I keep on saying that with you, but everything that we do talk about tends to tie together. Now, we've got 4 minutes before the break, Tony. I don't know if you want to get into something new right now, because I'd hate to cut you off before we go to the break, man.
Well, we'll just use the opportunity to review a little bit about what we talked about on Monday. And I want to refer back to another researcher, another mathematician, Sierpinski, Sierpinski. Sierpinski has various geometric shapes. Again, Platonic solids. These are two-dimensional and three-dimensional. He uses a Sierpinski triangle. That's the greatest packing, the closest packing of triangles within a outer triangle. He does the same thing with the triangle, but in 3-dimension, and here it is again, the Sierpinski tetrahedron, or tetrix, a 3-dimensional analog of the Sierpinski triangle. What I'm getting at, folks, is in the 600 model, spherical model that I put forth as the model of the universe, continues to be reinforced by mathematicians, by astrophysicists, by astrologers, by astronomers, and by particle physics and quantum physics researchers, that they see the tetrahedron at all scales within our universe. And even in the math that we've been laying out here with the balanced ternary, it prescribes the triangle, and in 3D, the tetrahedron. So take a look at Sierpinski. There's an awful lot that you can find in there that is really eye-opening. And also Wolfram, Wolfram. Look at the Wolfram mathematics. That is a whole new form of science. He published a very significant book I think it was in the 1980s. I don't have my notes open right now, but Wolfram prescribed a new form of mathematics and geometry that resulted in what he called the new science. The new science is what everything we see here that we're talking about with quantum computers, and even in particle physics with the particle accelerators, is built upon the new mathematics of Wolfram. And when we come back from the break, I'll have the actual title of the book for you. I just don't have those notes open right now. Go ahead, buddy.
Awesome stuff. And we're almost at the end of the first hour. But like I promised you at the start of the show, we're joined by the man himself, the descendant from the Knights Templars, no less, Mr. Johnny Whistles. How you doing?
It'll be even better if I get the mute button going, Kev, but yeah, doing well.
One of these days, Johnny, one of these days, you know, when you're in your new job, right, we've been a call centre, please tell me you're not going to mute yourself up, because I can picture you sitting there and the other person on the end of the phone. Hello? Is there anyone there?
Well, that would be quite frustrating, since the fact that they'll probably be in a bad mood already because their equipment isn't working. So, yeah, I better answer it pretty quick.
We'll get more with Johnny Whistles after the break. Joe Joseph is with us as well. And of course, Anthony Pack. Anthony Pack, check it out.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are moving into hour number 2 right here on the Kev Baker Show with me, your host, Kev Baker. We've got Johnny Whistles. He has just joined us live as well. I found Joe Joseph hanging about on the Skype. And of course, been a Wednesday night, we are being joined by our good friend, fellow co-host, and a host on the network. You can catch him on a Friday, 10 p.m. UK, 5 p.m. East Coast, 2 p.m. West Coast. Funnily enough, it's the same time as KBS. And like I say, you can catch him on the Anthony Pack Show every Friday before Freaky Friday. So, Tony, before I absolutely blow Joe's mind with a little video clip, I know you were wanting to give a shout out to a book that you were talking about.
Yeah, I can be so dense sometimes when it comes to remembering the titles of books or people's names even. I said he wrote a book that changed science, that it was a new kind of science. Well, duh, it is. That's the name of the book, A New Kind of Science. Drum roll, please. Jeez, I tell you, sometimes my brain just fries because I hang out with you guys too much. But anyway, no, I shouldn't blame you. I blame myself. Here's the deal. He was talking about, in essence, breaking down our reality, our world, if you will, into compartmentalized computer programs that could be empirically studied, so that you could look at them in a laboratory, you could take apart different segments of life, that you could look at life and put it into compartments. And then you could write software programs that were very specifically targeting different areas of life. Let's, for example, how many emails do you get in a day? And when do they come in? And what are their sources? And how long are they? And how much information is in there? And what sort of information? And so let's talk about, a simple way of representing this. It's graphing your emails. So that would be an empirical way of looking at something that goes on in your daily life. And when they look at computers and programming them, even a classical computer, they try to make the programming very specific to a compartmentalized area that they otherwise would consider to be abstract. So what I'm saying here is that Wolfram, Stephen Wolfram, published a book called A New Kind of Science. And that was in early 1997, somewhere around there. But you can go and take a look at Wolfram. Just type in Stephen Wolfram. He's got a beautiful website. It's a lot of mathematics and geometry, but the point is, this is the foundation for D-Wave. This is the foundation for not just binary, but certainly the balanced ternary world of programming. And just want to offer, Monday I thought that balanced ternary might be, from a point of view of conjecture, might be what D-Wave is using now, or perhaps had been using in its early formation as its programming language, balanced ternary instead of binary. Well, going back as far as 2012, I found information that proved that D-Wave, watching another presentation by none other than Gordy Rose himself back in 2012, and then in 2015, he was talking about facial recognition and the reconstruction of photographs utilizing facial recognition software in the D-Wave quantum computer world. And what I'm leading up to here is that he specifically was citing -1 and +1 and leaving out the 0 of balanced ternary because he felt that it wasn't necessary to the audience he was addressing to cite the 0, but he was presenting the -1, +1 of ternary computer programming. So now I'm taking it out of the world of conjecture and saying definitively, again, from the lips of Gordy Rose, they are actually using -1, 0, and +1 programming language, what we have called, instead of qubits, which are quantum bits, binary, are trits, trinary qubits. So there you are, folks. You're not going to hear it anywhere else except here on the Kev Baker Show. Take it away, bud.
Wow, we really are raising the bar tonight because we're geeking out here. And even in the chat, we've got the quite brilliant and a fellow host on the network. I'm so proud to be able to say that. Brooks Agnew in the chat listening in as well right now. And Tony, when you're talking about Gordy Rose and he's talking about the -1 and 1s, I imagine the 0 in that system is what we were talking about on Monday night. That is how you loop it back, how it teaches itself when it actually got it wrong, right?
It is, and that's where it's trying to achieve balance, is in the circle, but geometrically, or in the center of 0. But geometrically, it is the center. And I'm just looking back here into our chat room. I think it was Daryl brought up the topic of fractal. Yeah, Daryl says fractal octahedrons and tetrahedrons. So let me address that. When you're talking about fractal, and we're talking about 0, and we're talking about the center, and we're talking about the balance between -1 and +1, in a fractal representation of geometry, we can either go all the way down to the singularity at the smallest level, or we can replicate outward into the largest scale of the universe. So fractal does play into this whole replication of tetrahedrons. It factors into quantum computing in terms of how it's programmed. So in a fractal sense, they are using geometry of the -1, the 0, and the +1 as a balance, geometrically as a tetrahedron. When they prescribe, and I'm saying this for Brooks Agnew's benefit since he just joined us, when you're looking at decoherence and error correction, they want to model the software in a binary 0 and 1 configuration of a cube for error correction taking 3 steps. And they will outline that as how many steps does it take to get from a known quantity like 000 to the correction. It takes 3 lines on the cube, okay, to reach a correction of a vertices, a joining. In the sense of the balanced 3-number system of -1, 0, and 1, the balanced ternary, that is represented, but they're failing to realize this, and this is why Kevin and I are bringing this up. The proper geometric arrangement in software for proper error correction is the tetrahedron, not the cube. So I won't go any deeper than that. That's something that, Brooks, you can listen to our show on Monday. We got into that pretty heavy. Go ahead.
Absolutely brilliant. And of course, we're talking D-Wave there. And we've got Joe Joseph with us tonight. And Joe, I was informing you that something quite magnificent happened just a few days ago. And we've often, the 4 of us here, teamed up together, be it on my show, be it on your show, or on Freaky Friday, right? And we've often discussed D-Wave and
Oh,
In
yeah.
particular, Gordy Rose. You know, that guy we love to dissect his 12, 15-minute video, whatever it was. We take apart everything he said. And, well, you're surprised when I informed you that Gordy Rose has been talking about us, dude. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm honored. I mean, that's great that they finally figured out who's been watching them and understands. Here's the thing that really gets me, you know, is they talk a real good game, but I wonder just how much they realize they're being used as tools by these the information in other dimensions. We'll put it that way. I like to call it information because it seems to be the catch-all phrase. But certainly they're being used. And I just don't think they understand and realize to what extent they're being used, you know? So very interesting. That's all I can say.
Well, all I can say is it's encouraging to know that Gordy Rose, one of the founders of D-Wave, he's at least spending time listening to Freaky Friday. Because get a listen to this.
Okay, so my previous company was D-Wave. I'll just show you a couple things. We build what are still the world's only quantum computers that you can buy. And the company, D-Wave, has been doing this. Thanks. I didn't really have much to do with it, but you know, I guess. So this is one of them. This is one of the processors. And a lot of interesting things happened to me over the years there. I got sent pajamas, a whole bunch of stuff. You know, there's lots of interesting things that happen when you build something like a quantum computer. But just as an aside, because I thought it was funny, one of the interesting things that's happened from the D-Wave story is there's this gigantic conspiracy that's arisen on the internet that goes like this. So D-Wave builds quantum computers. The way that they work, if you know how this works, is one of the interpretations is that you tap into these parallel universes and they do computations. Sounds really weird. But what's happened is this idea has been hijacked to describe something called the Mandela effect, which is this thing where the past changes. So think about something you know to be true from the past. And then imagine you went out on the internet and you can't find it at all. It's not there. It doesn't match with your experience. So these people think that D-Wave is responsible and CERN. And of course, the quantum key to the abyss factors into it somehow. I'm not exactly sure how.
He loves my title. He absolutely loves it. And behind him, when he's talking about that, Joe.
But wait, I just got to give you my. He's like, and they say it's keys to unlock the abyss. That's kind of how he said.
Your thoughts on that, Joe? Because here he is.
He totally dude, come on. That was damage control. That's all that is. You know that, right? That's what that's all about.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I can't get it. What do you reckon, Whistles?
Kev, I mean, when you first told me about it, it still actually makes a tingle go through me. Actually, somebody like that who must have been listening to the show and must have loved that title, Kev, because, I mean, he actually read it out. So, man, your name's in lights now, Kev.
Again, Tony, you see, just more confirmation for me. I keep saying it, but out of all the things he could have spoke about, all the customers that D-Wave serve, all the amazing kind of technological feats that it's able to achieve, no, he picks Freaky Friday and decides to talk about that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I'm glad we're on the radar, but think about this, folks, in the audience. Why would Gordy Rose, who's there at Tech Vancouver, to address an audience that is there to learn more about his robot company by the name of Kindred? And it is a wholly owned subsidiary of D-Wave, which Gordy Rose helped to found. And he's now heading up Kindred, and they're, by his own words, they're incorporating AI into the robots of Kindred. That's their business model. But why would he step back from talking about the topic of AI and robots and bring up the Mandela effect? Give me a break. But the reason is because it's a psyops. Go back and listen to our discussions. It's bringing it up the bell curve. It's bringing it to the tipping point so that it is in the mainstream thought process of Joe's, Sickback, Joe Bag of Donuts out there, never heard about Mandela. All of a sudden, he's going to hear it. And Kev played the mainstream media from Fox News Channel 10 clip about Mandela effect. And of course, they made fun of it. But what they're doing is they're bringing the Mandela effect to the public consciousness so that they can see it everywhere now. It's just like saying, hey, watch out for blue Priuses. Well, all of a sudden, you see them in around every corner. That's what they're trying to do with the whole Mandela effect, is to get people to see it everywhere. Then they begin to become fearful about it, and then they will present the solution. This is all a Hegelian dialectic. That's why Gordy Rose brought it up in a public forum like that when it has nothing to do with the topic at hand. Go ahead.
Brilliant. And you know, Tony, I'm sorry, Joe, we haven't had your take on this Mandela effect in a while. It's been too long since I've hung out with you, man. And we're open to all new ideas about Mandela effects on here. But what's your take on all of this as you're continuing to see it unfolding?
Oh, man, I'll tell you what, it just gives more validation that we truly do live in a construct, a matrix, and that what we're doing by poking holes into this construct and making Swiss cheese out of it is totally and completely changing our reality as we can perceive it. You know, so that's the thing, is as we do this and as we basically pollute that construct, the coding, if you will, the veil. Oh, man, I mean, there's so many ways we can talk about it. It just, it's totally and completely manipulated the way things are. I mean, oh, man, I'm so glad that, A, we live in the time that we do now, because, I mean, how cool is it, Kev, to actually be in a time where we're really at the edge of it's either going to go really bad or humanity's really going to straighten itself out. I really feel like we're at that point where there's a major shift that's going to occur. Now, whichever way it goes is really up to us. Typically, though, the powers that shouldn't be don't exactly allow it to happen in a smooth fashion. Humanity has a way of, using some of the bad traits of humanity to really screw things up and implement things like AI. I mean, think about AI. It has so many different benefits that we can talk about. Or, you know, when we talk about CRISPR-Cas9 technology, there's so many benefits to engineering out genetic defects and things like that. But it's when people take it places where it shouldn't go. That's the problem that I have. And that we always do that. You know what I mean? We always go places where we shouldn't. So that's kind of the hard thing. And then, you know, you can't exactly limit it because free will's there. So how do you limit it? You know, it's a slippery slope for sure, buddy. You know, but I'm glad at least Jordy Rose was able to acknowledge the fact that, hey, look, to me, that was confirmation that it absolutely does exist. And it was valid enough for him to have to address it.
Absolutely. And we're even getting comedians like Jeff Dunham. They're talking about it now. The movie's going to come out. Like Tony said, Fox News, they're talking about it. And you were talking about AI there, Joan. It is going to be a paradigm change for sure. It's going to be like moving into a new age. It really is. And Johnny, that AI, we were talking about Kindred when we started off with Tony. And that's the new company that Gordy Rose has actually moved to. And he sees us putting the AI into robots that experience the real world like us, and bada bing, bada boom, that will lead to consciousness. But your thoughts on Kindred, Johnny?
Well, Kev, every time I hear that name, I honestly cringe, because it's like we're meant to embrace these robots with a name like Kindred as like part of our family, and I really don't. I'm not a robot person, as you know, Kev. I usually shoot the heads off them. But no, it's going to be a problem. There is a fantastic reason to have robots, but it's not going to be the way that we want it.
Not with this AI the way it is, Tony. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would. And I'd like to give a little bit of historical perspective on D-Wave, moving way back before Kindred was even around. In the early days, back in 2010 of D-Wave, on their public website, they stated that by early 2015, 5 years later, that their computer that would be released, which would be the 1024, that they would achieve both AI and sentient status in their computer. Okay? So with the 1,000-qubit model that they sold in January and February of 2015, they admitted back in 2015 that it was AI, but they left off the sentient part of it, even though that was a public goal of theirs back in 2010. Now, if it's bad enough that they failed to mention the sentient status of the 1024 model, the 1000, and they're at the 2000 now, which is the 2048 chipset. But the fact that not only did they leave off the sentient part of it, but they stated it was AI. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but very seldom do I ever hear the words AI and D-Wave's quantum computers in the same breath, in the same sentence. And even when Gordy was talking about his robot company, Kindred, he was talking about AI, but he didn't specifically say the AI was being derived from his parent company, D-Wave.
Right. Absolutely. You know, and then just to validate things, Facebook recently had to shut down one of their AI projects because the AIs actually created a language between each other that humans couldn't understand, just out of its, you know, like a self-protection mechanism, I would think, or to more efficiently communicate between the two. It was two AIs talking to one another. And it concerned the researchers so much that they shut it off. You know, if they could do this, and it was in a, what was it? They went out for lunch basically, and by the time they got back, this thing had totally, completely created its own language so that the humans couldn't swoop in on it. Yeah, that's, I mean, this is the power that you're talking about here. And
well, it's a non-anthropomorphic discussion. That when that story broke, Kevin and I started jumping on this idea of have AI look back at humanity from a non-human perspective as a machine. And what would AI say about humanity? How would they view humanity? If they developed their own independent language, what does that say about AI's perspective on us?
Can I say it in a cheesy 60 robot's voice?
Sure.
Wow, what a soup sandwich. That's what they probably look at humanity as.
Or is it Danger Will Robinson?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's like,
yeah.
Think about it. It's just take yourself out of humanity for a second. I know it's kind of hard to do, but
non-anthropomorphic.
Yeah, if you could, and you were just to observe humanity's behavior, wow. I mean, we could get into all the different reasons why humanity does what they do, but I find the biggest problem that I find is just how evolved we think we are, but how tribal we really are. Still, how I don't know.
Let me jump in here, Joe.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna cut you off and just be a jerk here today. Hey, from a Christian perspective now, we're talking about an AI perspective. Let's talk about Christian's perspective, from God's perspective. What do you think God's plan is for us in the face of the advances of AI? And we'll come back from the break on that.
Oh, that's huge, ain't it, Kev?
Oh, it is, but I've had a crazy time slip. I thought we had 10 minutes left. Oh, my word. Join us after the break. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
There we go. We are back, and like I was saying before the break, I definitely had some kind of episode there. I thought we had so much longer left to go, but that's because the conversation right here on KBS tonight is brilliant, absolutely amazing. You know, I dreamt of this kind of thing when I was putting this show together, and now that I've got the 2 hours, just brilliant, we can do this. But big shout out to Rock Robster out there in the chat room. That is, of course, our very own Robbie Spencer. And stay tuned, because later on, just before the end of the show, we've got a nice little surprise to play us out tonight. But Joe Joseph, I'm back to you, sir, because there's a question being posed and you want to tackle this head on. And the question goes something like, what would God's perspective on AI be in terms of advancements of AI being pushed by Satan?
Well, this is kind of how I see it. Everything in terms of humanity is cyclical. We always seem to go full circle. It happened from creation to the flood. God had to destroy things because Satan was trying to do away with the pure DNA that would lead to the birth of Christ. He was trying to taint all the DNA to prevent Jesus from being born, is basically what the plan was pre-flood. Then the flood happened to preserve the DNA. Noah survives. And now you have this whole cycle that we're in. And I think we're getting towards the end of it, where DNA, again, is going to get tainted. And it's going to be who has the pure DNA and who doesn't, and it's almost a la Brave New World, where Brave New World, you had the society that was very classed. You had your alphas and your epsilons and all this kind of stuff. And based on your classification is, and your genetic profile is that's what you want. And that's what Satan wants, is that nice structure. That's what, because he can do it better than God. It's not that you're looking at hellfire or anything else. Satan's very easy. I can do it better. That's what he's saying. That was his rub the whole time. And it still is rub. So that's his thing, is he's saying, I can do it better than you, and I'm going to show you how it's done. And so this is through the manipulation of DNA, and also the whole quantum factor now, being able to manipulate the construct, which is what's starting to happen, I think, with the whole Mandela effect. So this is just confirmation to me, at least, that we're at a point where I expect, just me personally, you just have to be ready at all times, because you never know what's going to happen, one day to the next. I truly believe we're that close. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think on that, Tony? I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
Well, I'm going to leave you with a big cliffhanger, because I'm going to do a plug for my upcoming forum, September 16th and 17th. Kev and I will be presenting for 2 days, for 16 hours, a live stream event. And we're only asking for, a very small helping hand of $10 a day for this forum to cover our costs. And we are going to talk about how God is going to equip us in the next couple of years, over the next couple of years. It's already started, but it's beginning to ramp up. And I'm not going to give the details here. I want it as a teaser so people will come and join us for this live stream conversation. But we're going to talk about...
Will you be smoking Sherlock Holmes pipes while you're doing that?
No, I don't smoke.
Sitting in easy chairs.
And I don't inhale.
Jackets.
And I don't inhale. Okay? So here's the deal. We are looking at biblical scripture,
yes,
in the framework of Sun Tzu's wonderful novel about warfare called The Art of War. And we're going to apply the strategies and tactics of warfare as it appears in the Bible to what is already starting and what is going to occur in terms of the transformation of those that are indwelt with the Holy Spirit. And I mean transformation as a wordplay for a reason, because of transhumanism. So take it away, buddy.
Wow. Absolutely right. When you look at Kev's boyfriend, his bromance, Elon Musk, and his neural lace, right? What an interesting thing. And of course, they're already testing it in mice. And it's, of course, shown promise. But, that AI human symbiosis, or even the third strand of DNA, like you've talked about in the past, these things are actually already here, and it's not going to take long for them to implement and sell as something that would tremendously benefit you. I mean, think about it. If you're able to, with neural lace, have access neural links to anything in the internet basically instantaneously. If you want to learn a language, no problem. Just download it. It's an app. That kind of interface. It's that close. And I mean, look at the how fast technology has advanced. Just from, say, when we were teenagers, Kev, where you had a 386 computer. I was happy because I had VGA graphics. Yeah, me and my 40 megabyte hard drive. And now we're talking about these. Take a look at Buffdale, Utah. The fact that they can now listen and record and tap into every communication on the face of the earth for the next 100 years. Every one of them they can store right there in Utah, and they do it. I mean, it's amazing in the advancement of technology. So I don't know. I see that there's a rapid coming together of technology and humanity, and there are going to be people that aren't going to want to do it. And I think those are the ones that are going to be separated out when that happens, and that's just my idea, my take on it.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a them and us kind of moment, I think, Joe. And, we look at that Wisconsin company that recently chipped their employees. They were really excited about it. They had a big party about it, that kind of stuff, right? Now, that came with nothing. No real perks, no advantages, no apps, like you were saying. But imagine when Elon Musk or somebody else does offer up this kind of neural lace, and it comes with able to make phone calls just using your mind, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
We've seen the employees of that company, how they were absolutely loving it, right? Think of when the Apple or somebody like that puts this out. The queues are going to be round the block, dude. And it really is. It's going to come to a point where there's going to be those that are part of this hive mind and those that aren't. But I have to say, Joe, imagine you giving Elon Musk a hard time. That guy gets a really bad rap, dude.
No. I get it, dude. I'm a big fan. I really am. I like the guy. But the issue is going to be, do you accept this? Like you said, the hive mind, Kev. That's really a good point, because and then look at how people act now with, let's just say, hey guys, the new iPhone's coming out. Oh my God, everybody has to run down to the Apple store, and there's lines around the corner and everything else for a stupid iPhone, So could you imagine, hey, neural lace, hey, what's the next greatest improvement? Yeah, how long is it going to be before people don't die? I think we see that here in the next 25, 30 years.
I think we might just see that. I agree with that. But Johnny, let's bring you in, because you're like me, right? You like the tech. I know we criticize it, stuff like that, but we like our gadgets. And imagine it, man, if they start offering up this neural lace, and bear in mind it would have internet access. You'd be able to Google things in your brain, Johnny. Probably see it in front of your eyeballs. I don't know how it will work, man, but that's the kind of things they'll be offering. It's going to be off the charts. People will pay all sorts of money for that.
Oh, they will, Kev. The people will queue up for these crazy things. And I seen that video as well, Kev, where the people were getting chipped. And honestly, it was probably one of the sickest things that I've seen. People actually giving themselves up, do you know what I mean, to this thing. To what? Open a door, put your computer on. The thing is, you have to have your hand near it anyway to do these things. So I don't get it, Kev. I know the technology that we've got, fantastic, but chipping people, neural lace, putting things in your brain. I mean, it's a great idea, Kev, to be honest with you, but that kind of tech, but we don't need it. We have a brain of our own. We can use it. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just not for it, Kev.
And it's going too far, Tony. This Internet of Things, was reading an article the other day, and it was actually quite hilarious because it was talking about these inventions that we're getting now, things like an app on your phone that will tell you just how long the eggs have been in the fridge and stuff like that. Utterly ridiculous uses for technology. But again, it's all going to tie into this SWS, everything listening to us, all that data flying back there. And like you're saying, with all that data going back, that eventually gives kind of birth to matter.
Yeah, they want to create a new reality, a false reality from the spontaneous conversion of data into matter that I'm talking about. The other point to having the Internet of Everything with everything connected is just to make it seem warm and fuzzy, kind of like the fuzzy logic we talked about on Monday, but to make it acceptable, to make it normal. This is the new normal. It's okay. It's just like the Pokemon Go. It's okay to be in that digital reality. Make it warm and fuzzy so people will want to live in the digital reality rather than in God's reality. I want to just, again, I put another plug in, and this time for the Entangled magazine that Kevin and I have put together, along with Rebecca in the chat room and Laura, and we've had a bunch of other great people from TFR that have contributed articles to the Entangled magazine at anthonypatch.com. That'll help us out if you guys will subscribe to Entangled. But, you know, this August issue, we had over 100 pages in that magazine. That's incredible. And I want to thank everybody that has contributed, everybody that has subscribed, and we are going to continue with that so long as we have subscribers and we're able to put the definitive information out there, really drilling down, really defining, really giving you the full explanation that we can squeeze into a magazine of topics that we cover just the surface of here in these shows. Even 2 hours is not enough for us to go down as deep as the articles that we presented. And Kev presented 12 articles in the August issue himself. So a huge contribution of information and video links so that it's an interactive medium. So really, we appreciate everybody that's helping us out with that. Go ahead, Kev.
Oh, absolutely. And Entangled, I can't recommend it highly enough. I like to geek out. I pay real money for the New Scientist. I like to buy the paper copy of that. I'm old school. I like to see it in print. And, you know, anything that you find in Entangled, it's right up there with the likes of New Scientist. And New Scientist, they've got, like, people with letters in front of their name. I'm kind of saying that tongue-in-cheek because they come from the kind of corridors of the church of pseudoscience. But my point is that we're just real people and we're sharing our information, not just me and Tony, lots of work from Robbie and Cheryl as well, everyone pulling together. And the fact it's now kind of expanded, what are we, 3-4 editions into 100 pages, you know, who only knows what this is going to give birth to, Anthony? It's something amazing, it really is.
It is, and I want to thank Robbie and Cheryl for being our publishers, putting together the graphics, formatting it, hosting it, making those covers look beautiful. I mean, these are very high quality, very glossy produced magazines, and that comes from the creativity and skills of Robbie and Cheryl Spencer, who do this for other people other than us. So highly recommend their services. And Kev, if you've got it queued up, let's go with one of their other talents, and that is their musical composition skills as musicians for over 30 years with their own studio. Go ahead.
And this is another kind of added weapon we can have now on the longer 2-hour show, because beforehand, myself and John, we would have lots of clips, and I'm sure we could have picked lots of music that we could play for you as well. But having people like Robbie and Cheryl Spencer out there, it's an absolute pleasure to play them for this because of the time and effort they've put into recording this stuff. It's amazing, it really is. You can hear their music. It's the entry or the opening credits theme song for Tony's show. But this is their latest work here. I want you all to sit back, relax, and enjoy Time to Resurrect.
The purpose of mapping the human genome and getting down to the quantum particles of DNA, this is all for the purpose of reconfiguring, reconstructing DNA from the quantum scale on up.
They took an evil mummy, his head they put away. Sunset, and it coming to us, that we burn in hell one day. Musk said that he has a love for quantum. Then he picked up Nimrod's head. Ooh, he looked at us with those big black eyes and said, it's time to resurrect. Baby, it's just time to resurrect. It's something that we all will regret. Baby, it's just time to resurrect.
The spark of light comes from, is conducted through monoatomic gold, the sacred fire that surrounds the actual head, the DNA, the literal head of Osiris, which is Nimrod, in a 4-foot 4-inch square cube container.
And now the key is turning, and he opens up the door. These demons, they surround us, so we pray, that's for sure. God said, any love is his love. And he threw them in the pit, yeah, threw them in the pit. And he looked at us with those big bright eyes and said, my love will never end. Baby, my love you'll not forget. Here's something Musk will always regret. He knows, they'll all be locked up in the pit.
The actual head of Osiris, which is Nimrod. In September, it will be moved to CERN, to the center point of the main ring, the target point for the main ring and the Awake Linear Accelerator in the communication with the dead to obtain that information to reconstruct from quantum particles the actual DNA of the Ogdo, their 8 Egyptian deities of old. You don't have to have their actual DNA anymore, but in the case of Osiris, they do.
And he loves God's loving, so Tony Pat says just forget. Yeah, Pat says forget. And he looks at us with those big blue eyes and says, my research was legit. Baby, my research was legit. That's something that you never will forget. You know, my research was legit. Yeah, you ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing yet. No, you ain't seen nothing yet. Nimrod will show you. Oh, and Elon Musk and Jody Rose and CERN.
Absolute genius. I just absolutely love that. Chat room rocking out to some of that. Thanks to Rob and Sean, everyone who was a part of bringing that together. Tony, absolutely brilliant. Every time they release one of these songs, it just gets better and better.
It does, and we hope there'll be a full album available, probably by Christmas time. But I'm really pushing Robbie and encouraging Robbie and Cheryl to come out with something even earlier than Christmas. But RobbieSpencerRocks.com. That's Robbie, ROBBI, SpencerRocks.com is where all that music can be found. And he, like I said, he's a professional recording artist, performing artist, graphic artist, just an extraordinary technician, but also a great musician and vocalist himself. And so I'm just floored. I never sought Robbie and Cheryl out. They came to me and said, hey, we'd like to do some stuff for you. I said, well, go for it. Be creative. And look where it's led to. Now we've got a magazine. Now we've got this conference that they're going to be handling the technical side for this live stream conference on the 16th and 17th of September. I mean, they do it all. So I really highly recommend their services. They've been outstanding in providing services to myself and Kev Baker, and I know they can do it for others as well. Thank you, guys.
No, brilliant. And, I would say that we've got 2 fellow musicians on the show tonight, but Joe's just a drummer, so that doesn't count. Johnny Whistles, what do you make of that one, man?
Ah, absolutely fantastic, Kev. And the lyrics from Sarah Snyder, I have to admit, it's absolutely fantastic. And amazing by Robbie and Cheryl. The two of them are absolutely fantastic. So a great job. Well done, guys.
Absolutely, I second all of that. And Joe Joseph, if you're there, if you're still hanging, man, what do you make of that? Brilliant stuff, right?
I'm just a drummer. What do I know?
You see, we do things different on KBS, Joe. Now we've got this 2-hour slot. Are you proud of me, man?
Wow. You getting into big time now, buddy. Absolutely. Well, this is good. It needed to be done a long time ago. You know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. After you started off and created this animal all those years ago, Joe, now look what it's led to. I blame you for all of this. But Tony, we've got about 5 minutes left tonight, man. What else do you want to cram in here before we leave these audience to tune in to the next show right here on TFR Live?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you, Mr. Pacharoni.
Oh, boy. You're putting me on the spot, aren't you?
You see, you're not only co-host, you're like special guest co-host on Monday and Wednesday. That means I can just burden you with it. So, yeah, what are we going into then?
Well, Friday, because it is actually my platform, we're going to get into a little bit more of the biblical scripture side of things, because you have to balance it out. We talk about the secular tech. We're going to talk about the biblical applications and targeting of tech. So we'll get into that on Friday because, as I said to our good friend Joe here, the question is, what do you think God, from his perspective, is going to do about things like AI and all the other areas of secular technology that have their roots in necromancy, communicating with the dead? Go ahead.
Oh, Joe, I would say your thoughts on that, but we've only got a few minutes left, right? And I want to get your thoughts on something else before we go tonight. Both you, Tony, and Johnny as well, but more specifically you guys, right? North Korea, Donald Trump, fire and fury, all bluster, or are we seeing start something really serious here?
I don't know. Did you see that Kim Jong-un actually released his strike map of the United States where he plans on dropping them?
That's not really good military drills, man. You don't really...
No, it's really not. But apparently, so right now, according to the strike map, Washington, D.C., Austin, Texas, San Diego, California, and Honolulu, Hawaii.
I thought he was going for that real massive cultural center of Guam.
Oh, well, yes, Guam is also on the map as well. But I found Austin, Texas to be a very interesting place. I was like, what? No.
You know why? Because that's where Alex Jones lives.
Hey, I thought they were buddies. I guess not. So,
you know,
he's going to take out Alex.
Tony, we listened to an interesting gentleman today, Dr. Dugan, I think his name is, a Russian guy on Alex Jones, and he was sounding a lot like us. He was talking about satanic AI takeovers and things like that. And he wasn't really thinking North Korea is the threat, was he?
No, he wasn't. And it really is. And it's not because we're preaching fear here, because God's got it all under control. But, yeah, they're pushing the fear of AI. But, yeah, he was sounding very much like he's been listening to us. And he's, a research scientist coming out of Russia itself. He was on Alex Jones, which I commend Alex for doing. That's great. Rebecca, I think you better move out of Austin, by the way.
Yeah, probably not a good thing to be there. Just saying,
She's in chat. She's in chat. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
But, Kim Jong, apparently, according to mainstream, lying media, false news, fake news, he only has one warhead. Well, I don't believe that, but the delivery systems are not there to hit his target. So I wouldn't worry about it. I would if I was in Guam. I'd be a little concerned, but no, it's not going to play out. And
Here's a question. Does he really have to hit a target? I mean, all he's got to do is put it up in a region. You can let the EMP sort things out.
EMP, maybe. Yeah, EMP.
Let's let Johnny in on this. Your thoughts on Little Kim before we go, John?
Well, I'm not sure if any of these things will actually reach because they've not got a great track record of actually leaving the launch pad. But thinking about him striking America, nah, I can't see it because if anything was a threat, it wouldn't even leave the ground.
Right.
Ooga booga. It will. Everybody's going to die.
On that fearful note from Joe Joseph, let me just
Ooga booga.
and tell you that tomorrow night it'll be myself in the first hour, and then I'll be joined by Johnny Whistles in hour number 2. Certainly, we're going to go full woo all night long. Alistair has been sending great links, absolute golden nuggets of woo today. Got so much material to go over tomorrow. It's going to be great. We're going to chill out before another big show on Friday with Anthony Patch. And of course, we'll all team up again for Freaky Friday. Don't go anywhere, folks, because coming up after the break is the next best show right here on TFR, and every show.
Pale pink mist fog. Ooga booga.
Oh, come on, Joe. Wherever you are, make it TFR.
Didn't touch that dial.
God bless you all.
And no ooga boogas from Joe Joseph.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Kev Baker, and this is the Kev Baker Show right here on TFRlive.com. Hope you're all having a good day, you're all settled down, and you are ready for another amazing 2 hours of radio with me, myself, and my good friend, co-host for a Wednesday and a Monday, and I'm his co-host on a Friday, author, researcher, speaker. He wears many hats, this man, Anthony Patch. He is here live with me tonight. And of course, for all you Whistler fans out there, and I know you come in your droves to hear the man, the myth, the legend that is Johnny Whistles. You know, it's not many shows in alternative media or even the mainstream can claim that they've got a direct descendant from the Knights Templars as a co-host. How unique is that? And I know all of you out there love the Whistler. He'll be along for the second hour of the show. And possibly, get this, we may have a surprise guest in the second hour to add to the mix as well. All of that to look forward to right here on KBS. And before we get going tonight, warm up slowly here, bit of a housekeeping out the way. Tomorrow, it's just going to be myself and Johnny. I've been getting sent lots of links by one of my chief researchers out there, Alistair. I don't pay him a penny, by the way. The guy he loves the woo. He's been sending me some terrific information today. I've got it all saved in a folder, and I'm going to blow your minds with that tomorrow night, myself and the Whistler. And of course, on Friday, you can catch me as co-host for Anthony Patch from 10 p.m. in the UK, and then I'll jump on to Freaky Friday right after that. 5 hours of radio for me on a Friday, and it's absolutely brilliant. Big shout out to Chris and Cherie Gio for putting this all together, and to my co-host, my friend, my, what do you call this, sparring partner in these crazy times, Mr. Anthony Patch. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, always good to be with you, my friend. And we've got a lot to cover today. We kind of pulled the trigger on a shotgun, and we've got a whole lot of things that stuck to the wall in terms of topics today. But we're gonna talk a little bit about Johannes Kepler today to lead off the show.
That's going to be fantastic, and just wait till the listeners hear this. But before we even get there, Tony, right, you know, over here in Europe, we're a strange bunch, okay? And it's summertime right now, and there is an absolutely blistering heat wave hitting southern Europe. And of course, typically, Scotland, we're not getting any of this at all, Tony. Nice day today, but we certainly aren't experiencing anything like the heat wave that they've dubbed Lucifer. I'm not kidding you, folks. There's a heat wave in Europe right now, and they have named it Lucifer. Now, they say that this was the people of Europe who came up with this name themselves. Although the only place I see this name being pushed, Tony, is in the mainstream media. Now, you're talking about some places reaching higher than 40 degrees Celsius. And it says here that heat waves, unlike storms, aren't named by meteorologists. So it's not some new trend that we're seeing, like where they name all the storms and stuff like that. But what do you think, Tony, using the word Lucifer to describe a heat wave? There's always more than one meaning to everything. And, you know, I think they use these words for a reason.
I think they do, just to create fear, and it also is a tip of the hat to who they actually are worshiping and where science has its roots. I think, to say that it's the people, that it's, the average person on the street, Joe Bag of Donuts, as I like to call it, giving names to storms and heat waves and all of that is pure nonsense. It comes out of the compromised weather services.
Absolutely. And, I obviously do feel for anyone that's living in that kind of heat right now. But over here in the UK, and especially Scotland, Tony, we pay hundreds and hundreds of pounds to go and spend 10 days, 14 days in blistering hot weather like this. It's not going to put any Scottish people off. And I can only imagine the varying degrees of sunburn they're going to come back with, because we're not used to heat like that, dude.
No. And, really, we've talked about this many times, that just stepping out into the sun, even with the chemtrail spraying that's, sort of covering over the sunlight, but, we feel the ultraviolet rays as pinpricks on the skin. And so to go out and lay in the sun at the beach or wherever, you're just setting yourself up for trouble nowadays. It's unfortunate, but you don't even have to have high temperatures. Just going out and being exposed is enough to create some problems in terms of leading to skin cancer.
And Tony, before we get into tonight's first story, sticking on this just briefly, dare I say climate change? I know people automatically think you're pushing some Al Gore agenda there, but climate change, it always changes. It's a natural, cyclical kind of phenomena. And do you think these kind of temperatures in Europe, and we've seen up in the northwest as well, I believe it's experiencing hot temperatures right now, kind of out of character. Do you think this kind of trend is set to continue? And that's not to spread fear or anything. It's just the times we're living in.
It is. A lot of times we have to look at the solar minimum that we're in now, and we're seeing more sunspot activity and, of course, a lot more in the way of charged particles in the form of flares being thrown off from the surface of the sun. And just as a real quick point, when we talk about flaring of the sun, those are charged particles. Let's just say protons for the sake of discussion today. Those particles, as they move away from the surface of the sun, as they move away from the flaring activity, certainly a lot of it is magnetically attracted back to the magnetic surface of the sun. But the particles that are thrown off, they actually increase in speed the further they move away from the sun, from the Gulf off the shores of Texas and Louisiana and places like that, move past Florida. But what it does is it actually travels northward along the eastern seaboard of the United States and eventually strikes Greenland, Iceland, but also the Arctic itself. And it draws those cold deep sea beds, that cold water, draws it from the north and brings it further down. And of course, it hits you guys in Europe as cold water, cold temperatures. But what it does is it creates a balancing effect. If you do not have the northern movement of the Gulf Stream to those cooler waters, the result is excessive heating of the planet, because the Gulf Stream does not have an opportunity to mix with colder water. There you go.
See, this is why I love hanging with you, Tony. It really is. I start off with just a kind of throwaway story about a heat wave in Europe, and look at the information that we get departed on us there. Absolutely brilliant. I love it, man. I love it. Now, something else you've come up with, and we've spoke about often in the past, is your theory about the 600-cell model of the universe. And that's where we're going to start tonight, Tony, because we often say that confirmations come along later on after you've put things out there. And the confirmation that you're about to get into tonight, well, this comes from way when.
Are you going to me? I'm sorry. Did you toss it?
Yeah, I tossed it to you about the 600-cell theory, how we've had some confirmation come through.
Yeah, the signal kind of dropped out there. Yeah, this is Johannes Kepler, and I'm just going to read from back in 1595 when he published The Cosmic Mystery. And if you would, go ahead and put the link up in the chat room for folks. And when you publish this this conversation on YouTube, go ahead and put the link up as well that I gave you that shows the solar system. It is a model, an animated GIF that shows the configuration according to Kepler in 1595 of the solar system. And it is comprised of the Platonic solids. Platonic solids are the sphere, the tetrahedron, the cube, and your basic triangle. So if you look at Johannes Kepler's model of the universe, what you are going to see is that, or model of the solar system, is the actual Platonic solids contained within the planetary orbits. Now, Kepler was putting forth the idea, and actually I think I'm going to correct this. Okay, yeah, he's got this here. In 1619, Johannes Kepler published The Harmony of the World, but he started in 1595 with the cosmographic mystery. What we're talking about here is that he was plotting the orbits of the planets as he observed them back in the late 1500s. And he was assigning the Platonic solids as the orbital pathways of the planets Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Earth, Venus, and Mercury. Now, when you look at this, the idea is the very center of this spherical model, again, a globe model of our solar system, and also the constellations. So the constellations are the outer surface of the globe, and then moving inward, he's showing the orbital pathways of the planets, the known planets at that time, as prescribing the tetrahedronally derived Platonic solids. As you move into the center of this illustration by Kepler, you will see at the center point the tetrahedron that I continue to go on and on and on about. Now, later on, we're going to talk about the significance, again, in math and in computer software coding and in cryptology, the significance of three numbers that relate to the tetrahedron. And we touched on this when we talked about balanced ternary numbers, -1, 0, and +1, and related that to quantum computing. So we'll get into that a little later on. We've got a 2-hour show, but we're going to touch back a little bit on that. What I'm getting at here in terms of geometry is that the tetrahedron is significant, according to Kepler, in prescribing the shape of the known solar system and therefore the known universe, extending out as far as the observable constellations forming the shell of this global model of what he was observing and others before him. So the tetrahedron factors into so many areas in science, whether you want to talk about biology, chemistry, particle physics, astronomy, astrology. All of these things tie in, and they have a spiritual component, which we'll get into a little bit later as well, in the Kabbalistic belief. Now, I'm not a Kabbalist, and I'm not a sacred geometry person, but all of these things have been, in my estimation, stolen and counterfeited from God the Creator, who set up all of these mathematical geometric arrangements and mathematical progressions of what we see with the planets. So, Kev, if you got a comment, go ahead, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to actually read the description from Kepler. Go ahead.
I'll let you catch your breath there, Tony. And anytime I hear about the Platonic solids been mentioned, our mutual friend, James Swagger, he informed me one time about something that blew my mind, because this actually came from Scotland, and there's something dated roughly to around 2000 BC. I've dropped the picture in the chat for you here, Tony, on Skype to look at. I'll drop it in the chat room at tfrlive.com/chat for listeners there to look at as well. But here we are, going back over 4,000 years, and yet whoever was kicking about, shaping these stones, they had knowledge of these Platonic.
In terms of Earth-directed particles, I'm not talking about the remainder of the particles throwing off into the cosmos, so to speak, but certainly with Earth-directed, they accelerate in speed increase in speed because of the magnetic attraction of the Earth itself to these oppositely charged particles. And therefore, the particles reach maximum acceleration, if you will, when they hit our magnetosphere, the shields around the planet. And with the changes, what they call the changes of shape or morphology of those shields due to things that are happening with HARP, NEXRAD, even with CERN when they're operating at high power with their magnets, anytime that you change the shape, that you lessen the integrity of the shields, tear it, or even puncture holes in it as HARP does, then you're allowing charged particles to move through the shields and to strike the surface of the Earth and to strike people. And it's not just ultraviolet rays, but it is actually charged particles. So think of the sun as a particle accelerator, and then the Earth acting as a magnet to increase the speed. The more of those particles that strike the Earth means that we also have more other bands in the electromagnetic spectrum, such as gamma rays and X-rays and ultraviolet rays, that are penetrating as well. So the particle count is a good indicator as to what types of energies, along with the particles, that we are now encountering. And that leads to heating of the atmosphere, changes in weather patterns, certainly changes in the Gulf Stream itself and the jet stream, because you have alternating areas that are being heated or cooled, but predominantly heated beneath the point in the shields that are either being opened or holes that are being manifest in it. So think about the shields, and that leads to a lot of what we're seeing in the way of abnormal temperatures. Go ahead.
You know, of living in Scotland, that Gulf Stream, that is absolutely critical to us maintaining the climate, or so-called climate, that we've got here, Tony, because, I mean, if you look on the atlas, on the map, I mean, we are basically on the same kind of latitude, longitude as Moscow, and we see the weather over there, right? But it's only thanks to the Gulf Stream that we don't end up having a similar climate to that. But when I was looking into the BP oil spill way back in 2010, they were talking about the Gulf Stream stalling, stuff like that. Thankfully, it hasn't done that yet, Tony. But I mean, can you imagine the knock-on effect that would have all around the planet? Because that's tied hand in hand to something called the thermohaline system, or the haline thermio system. And it's basically like the lungs of the planet, because that river of water that's in the jet stream, and the Gulf Stream is just one kind of connecting part to as above, so below. I mean, this goes right round the planet, and everything would change if you just take one of those links out.
Yeah, a lot of times people, they focus on the heat that is contained within the Gulf Stream itself, and that moves, of course,